Good morning, everybody. My name is Joe Malone, and we are kicking it here on the Lethal Lifestyle Podcast. Today, I want to talk to you about active shooters, specifically with schools or workplaces, really more specifically with schools than anything, and why we're going to continue to see them. They're not going away anytime soon, and a large part of this has to do with the way that we respond to active shooter incidents. So when you look back at fires and fire drills and how we run fire preparedness and fire prevention and fire building code, everything fire related in schools, there's been thousands of fires across schools all across the country every single year. But how many kids die in a school fire? Well, according to the latest statistic that I read from 2019, one kid died and it was the actual arsonist themselves. So how could we have thousands of fires all across the country in schools and only one kid, the perpetrator, is the person who actually dies in the event? Yet we have one school shooting and we're losing anywhere between 3, 5, 7, 10, 15, 24 kids. Well, it has to do with the way that we respond to them. Now, let me talk about what I mean by this. Lockdown policies are the dumbest fucking thing that anybody can ever do when it comes to an active shooter incident once the shooter is inside of the school. When we look at things like Uvalde, there was a lot of things that went wrong that day. Particularly, the door was left open, which allowed the shooter inside. Now, don't get me wrong. Lockdowns do work when it's an external threat. When the threat has not made its way inside of the building yet, that's when lockdowns do work. If you can't get inside, then you can't cause harm. Get away from the windows, go into the hallway, and have a strict accountability system so that you can't have some shooter shooting into the school. Now, I would recommend just having bullet-resistant material on the windows. That, to me, is the best solution possible, because when you deal with moving kids into the center of the school, like hallways, for example, there's a lot of other issues that can arise from that. However, people don't want to invest the money to create bullet-resistant window material and bullet-resistant blinds, because we always want to create defense in layers. So you have the window film material, then you have the blind. So if somebody's sitting there shooting through a window, it's going to take them a lot of firepower in order to start breaking through that thing, which gives us time, which delays their ability to inflict casualties, which gives us time, which, yeah, if you're in that classroom, get the hell out and go to the damn hallway. Now you have a smaller number of students who are going to a centralized portion of the school, not everybody just piling in there. And there's a lot of flexibility in that type of a response plan. Now, going back to once the shooter's inside the building, locking down is the single dumbest fucking thing that anybody can ever do. And I cannot believe schools are so unwilling to work with me on this. When I got out of the Marines in 2019, it was right after Marjory Stoneman happened in 18, and I decided I wanted to create an active shooter consultation company. I got the highest credential in the world for the security industry, a CPP, Certified Protection Professional, through the American Society of Industrial Security, ASIS, International. And my experience as a Special Operations Marine, 7 deployments overseas. We had green on blue or insider attack incidents on 2 of my deployments, unfortunately. I wasn't there, but it affected my sister team. And then the other one was on the base that I was at. And yet nobody still wanted to work with me. Why? Because administrations are scared. Police departments are scared. Now, don't get me wrong. I love my cops. But you all have not been equipped or trained properly to handle these types of situations. Now, you're getting a lot better at it because it's been like 6 years since you really started to bear the brunt of the burden with this whole situation, this paradigm, this weird counterterrorism dynamic, but you're still light years behind. And the reason is mostly due to ego and fear of being relieved of your command, fear of being criticized from an external outside force, fear of not making the right choice, which you're plagued with these days based off the scrutiny that you face with society. But ultimately, fear-based responses and fear-based decision-making is not going to be acceptable in terms of an outcome, in terms of a response. You can't think from a fear-based perspective and expect a good, positive, creative flow thought. With schools, it's their ego as well. Egomaniacal administrators who think that they're making the right choice because they've been told to by somebody else who's making a fear-based response, i.e. law enforcement officers, who, again, have no training in any of this whatsoever. Again, cops are getting better at it now, but still very far behind, especially compared to the special operations community. There's nobody else on the world who is better at responding to an insider threat than the United States Special Operations Forces. It's what we live in. It's what we trained in. It's what we've experienced our entire lives. So when the threat is inside of the building, the fact that you're locking it down and telling kids to stay still, or this Alice training that's going around, Alice sucks, straight up. It sucks. Every teacher I've ever talked to said it was a joke. And that is the people who aren't giving it criticism based off of like the training material and criteria. They're saying, I died. Every time, I died. Throwing a stapler at a shooter is the dumbest fucking thing that you could ever fucking do besides sitting in the building. Get out. So many of these active shooter incidents, people are just sitting there hiding. The Orlando nightclub, Marjorie Stoneman, Sandy Hook, Uvalde, they sat in the school for 75 minutes before anybody decided to actually leave the school. Why? You're on the first freaking floor. Get out. The exit's right there. The window's right there. Have 4 pre-designated rally locations, north, south, east, and west, because life is fluid, life is dynamic, and you're not going to go to your little assigned school area, just like Marjorie Stoneman unfortunately found out. 14 of the 17 people killed that day were hiding in classrooms, and they were bragging about their active shooter response plan for 8 months leading up to the incident. Activated code red. What's a code red? That's what 2 teachers said to each other once they realized there was an active shooter there. And the whole 30 students per classroom, because if we put 30 students in each classroom, they could hide behind the concrete wall. And if we lock the door, the shooter can't get in. First of all, the shooter could just shoot the freaking handle off the door and open it up. They could shoot the striker off, bam, door's open, now everybody's dead. The amount of time it takes them to do that, you could have had half the class out of the room, if not the entire class, by getting out the window. But then what did Nicholas Cruz do? He pulled the fire alarm, everyone went flooding in the hallways. And then you think they went to their 30 per student prescribed areas? No, they had a bunch of students flooding in wherever they could, which ultimately led to the ability of him to just shoot them all through the door. How stupid of an idea is that to just sit there? 4 pre-designated rally locations within 300 meters, roughly. It depends upon the geography in the area surrounding the school. But you have rally locations that are within a line of sight to some degree with the rally location in the school. So if I'm a teacher and educator and I'm worried about kids getting lost, which it'll be chaos and there probably will be kids that get lost. That's why we develop guardrails and why we train the kids on this in a cool, calm, collected environment. You don't just say, active shooter, everybody be quiet, be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. Everyone's going to die if you don't be quiet. What are you doing to little kids? Traumatizing the hell out of them. Do it like a fire drill. Okay, everybody, we got this alarm that's been activated. Let's all go ahead, stand up, get in a single file line along this wall, start jumping out the window here. Okay, now we're going to walk over to our pre-designated rally location. Now, is it going to go down like that in real life? No, probably not, but that's fine because what we're doing is we're creating a baseline of understanding within the human brain. You're teaching them how to respond to this type of an incident, where to go, what the steps are to get there. Hey, stand up against the wall, out the window, go there, that direction. This physical geographic hard point that's not going to change minus a natural disaster of some magnitude. Then stand by and get accountability. If I'm a teacher, I can see line of sight, kids getting lost. I can rally them up. I have guardrails in place, which says, hey, don't go past this street, ladies and gentlemen. If you make it to that street, but you can't find your rally location, just stop and wait for help to arrive. Some people will say, oh, Joe, well, the shooter could just see you walking across the open field there and just start shooting at you. Yeah, no shit, you idiot. But he could also just walk right up to you and blow your brains out when you're sitting in the side of a classroom, hoping, praying, and crying that you don't die. I mean, seriously, the whole objective of this person is to kill as many people and inflict as much pain as possible on as many people as possible in the last few moments that they have to live. They're not leaving that building alive, most likely. And neither will you if you just sit there. But yet we sit and we just tell our kids to be quiet, be victims. Hide, hope, and die is what I call it. It's not run, hide, fight. It's hide, hope, and die. Reunification process. Have parents meet you at a third-party location. Parents, I understand you're scared, you're petrified, but you're not going to rescue your kid unless you're somebody like me and you're actually going to run in that school with a firearm and you're well trained and well equipped and capable of actually doing something like that. You're not going to rescue anybody, especially most of you men, most of you parents out there. You ain't trained for anything, which is a huge reason why you need to get with somebody like myself or Tim Kennedy or Sean Ryan. It doesn't matter. Get with one of these dudes who are training people up on how to defend their homes, Mike Glover, their lives, their livelihoods. That's what it's all about. Knowing how to defend and protect the people that you love and care about, so you don't feel like a helpless idiot in those situations. But I digress. To meet at the assigned reunification point. You're only adding to the chaos and the difficulty of the entire situation. You're only contributing to your child's endangerment when you show up on scene at the actual place. Now, if cops are sitting there for 75 minutes and still haven't made entry, obviously there's something wrong. And that's just a complete shit show in itself. And there's nothing that we can really say or do to help you gamify that or be ready for something like that, because that's just insane. I wouldn't expect any parent to wait at a reunification point for 75 minutes just to find out that the incident is still occurring. But you need to go there first. That is your assignment as a parent within this process. You don't go rushing into a building that's on fire when all the kids have already evacuated. You don't go rushing up to the school to contribute to the chaos of the situation in the scene and block fire trucks when they're trying to possibly rescue other kids, which might be your kid. You might be contributing to the delinquency of the response to the safety of your own child. So go to the reunification point and follow the guidelines and the protocols. The reunification point cannot be the rally location. It needs to be a third-party location about a mile down the road, at least. So once the threat's inside the building, everybody needs to evacuate. They evacuate to one of the 4 pre-designated rally locations. Once at that rally location, they gain accountability of the people that they have with them. Once they have accountability of the people that they have with them, they load them up and bring them to the reunification point. For kids that get lost in the process we have guardrails established in place. Don't go past X road. Don't go past this road. Don't go past the river. Whatever that hard geographic structure is that's easily identifiable, tell the kids to just stand there and wait. Police will be able to respond around the area, set up a perimeter, and then start to do a sweep to make sure that they get accountability for anybody who possibly didn't make it to the rally location. But the rally locations are so close that it's really difficult for kids to get lost to begin with, especially when you've trained them in a cool, calm, collected manner so that they understand where it is that they need to go in these times of great stress. Then you can know who's missing, who possibly needs help, who's been injured, how they've been injured, all within a matter of minutes. You could have complete accountability of your entire staff, or at least accountability of those who you can have accountability of, because maybe there are some kids who've been killed or wounded, or staff members who've been killed or wounded inside of the school. But guess what you just did now is you completely took away all of the distractions for the responding law enforcement officers so that they know when they go in, they're dealing with 2 types of people: injured, killed staff members or students, and the shooter. That's it, plain and simple. When we look at the Nashville school shooting, you know why so few people were casualties in that? Because they ignored the lockdown procedure and they evacuated, and it was effective. Yet all across this country, we're still teaching lockdown. I gave a speech a couple of days ago to a group of executives, and I asked them, what do you do in an active shooter incident? What do we all get taught? And they said, well, you barricade yourself, you lock down. No, that's the victim mentality that I'm talking about. Get out. It is exponentially more difficult to shoot somebody when they're running away from you. And according to stats, and I'm somewhat making this number up, but when I go back and I look at all my case studies from every active shooter incident from the 60s until now, minus the Las Vegas shooting, Virginia Tech, I think, had the farthest casualty from shooter to casualty distance ratio that was reported. And it was like 20 yards or something like that, or 30 yards. If you get past 50 yards from an active shooter, your chances of survival go up like over 90%, if I'm remembering my math correctly. Again, minus the Vegas shooting, because that was anomalous. The two main times when people get killed or wounded in an active shooter incident is the initial round of gunfire and hiding. Now, I want to take a moment to recognize the dudes at the bowling alley and the main active shooter incident pretty recently. That was pretty gangster what they did. And I don't want to see the camera footage of them obviously dying, but I want to see the camera footage of their final moments, because that's what I'm talking about. Sometimes life's going to throw you some shit and you're just fucked. What are you going to do with it? You're going to cower? Or are you going to go out like a warrior fucking going home? Some people might say that sounds cheesy. Wait until it's your last final fucking moments and see how fucking cheesy that sounds. Americans have just been so pampered with so much luxury that you don't even need to be in touch with the primal aspects of your existence. You could literally go throughout your whole entire life being a fat, dumb, lazy fuck. Stupid and numb, just benign, and then die, because our society is so well constructed. It literally carries you through it, carries you through life. You don't have to do anything. And so when you're met with adversity, you're met with a challenge, you're confronted with something that isn't within your mind-numbing, benign lives existing plan, or lack thereof, you just crumble. But not that dude. Not the ones who have come before him who said, you know what? I'm within 21 feet of this dude, this chick, because there have been female active shooters. One of them actually is still at large, never was arrested, according to what I'm understanding. You can find that information on the FBI's website, which even brings me back to another point. We don't even have a unified definition of what an active shooter is across all the different government department agencies. So how are we ever going to be able to confront it? But if you're within 21 feet of that shooter, you got two choices. You can try to turn around and run and you'll probably die. Or you could charge that motherfucker. Now, this is where knowledge and experience of how guns operate can be so effective. First of all, most active shooter incidents happen with a handgun, plain and simple. AR does not stand for assault rifle. And even still, handguns account for the vast majority, like over 70%, maybe even over 80%. I don't know, I haven't looked lately. Of active shooter incidents are handguns. Semi-automatic handgun. The way a semi-automatic handgun operates is it's a gas recoil weapon system, meaning that when you pull the trigger, the gas that expands and is released from that round, that shell casing, the gunpowder, it burns. When you pull a trigger, a firing pin strikes the back of the bullet, which is called the primer. The primer creates a source of friction. Source of friction creates heat. That heat is enough to ignite that gunpowder within the shell casing. As that gunpowder ignites, grows and expands, that heat and that pressure grows and expands. Ultimately, that airtight capsule, the round, which has the actual bullet projectile and that shell casing that encapsulates the gunpowder, is going to reach a point where it no longer can hold itself. So that gaseous expansion pops that bullet, and that bullet goes straight out of the barrel, out the muzzle, and then downrange towards its intended target. The residual of that gas is what's pushing that bullet forward, creating that velocity, that speed of the round. The residual, the remain behind gas, is actually pushing back on what's called the slide, which is the top portion of a handgun and a semi-automatic handgun. And it's pushing back on the buffer spring, which allows another bullet to come up. So as that buffer spring then therefore pushes forward, once that resistance is gone due to that gaseous expansion out the ejection port, then that spring pushes that slide back forward, loads another round, and then the process can begin itself over again. It's called the cycle of operations. If you disrupt that cycle of operations, simply just by grabbing the gun, the first bullet will go off. This isn't some Detroit survival training bullshit. It'll go off. So don't have it pointed right at you. That's why it's important to know how to just grab and deflect. But guess what's not going to happen? It's not going to load another round. And you can beat the shit out of that person, take the gun from them, because if you get your hand on a gun, it's really easy to manipulate it to get the person to let go of it. All you got to do is just break their wrist upward, and you better be breaking everything in that human being, all bones, all spirit, all freaking everything that they have. Take that gun away. Now you know that you tap it to ensure that magazine's fully seated. It didn't get dislodged within the struggle. You rack it in order to rechamber around, and then you begin to engage that threat. Or you could just sit there and piss yourself and die, or try to run away. But when you're within 21 feet, your chances of survival, dependent upon what's around you, is probably going to be to assault through that ambush, assault through that attack. And you're probably going to get shot. But you know what? It usually takes multiple rounds to stop a human being. You might get shot once, you might get shot twice. Tupac got shot 5 times at point blank, twice in the head and survived. 50 Cent got shot 9 times and survived. The Game got shot 5 times and survived. People get shot all the fucking time. Just because you get shot doesn't mean you're going to die. It takes multiple rounds, well-aimed, well-placed shots in order to stop a human being. The body is incredibly resilient. So how are you going to go out? Running? Sitting? Crying? Or are you going to get trained and educated and know when you can take calculated chances because the odds just aren't in your favor? We need to change the way that we're approaching active shooter response. We need to prioritize evacuation to these pre-designated rally locations. When we can respond swiftly and effectively to active shooters, just like we do with fires in schools, less people are going to want to do them because they're not as effective at the desired end state, meaning they don't get to kill or harm as many people as they want and become notorious in the news. Stop locking down the schools once the threat is inside. It is the dumbest thing that you could do. You are guaranteeing the death of your students. Your kids are being put at risk. Lose the ego, ladies and gents, and start to smarten up. Get your kids out of the school. Get away as fast as possible. Distance plus time equals safety in all aspects when it comes to personal safety and somebody trying to physically harm you. All right, everyone, that's all for today. Take care. God bless. I love you all. Join the Lethality University. Getting ready to release the Home Defender series. Maybe it'll already be released at this point. I don't know when this podcast is going to get put out. But as always, if you need anything, I'm always here for you. Take care.